Now stop imagining, because it's already happening. On May 19, 2025, in the heart of Kigali, Rwanda, the continent took a bold, irreversible step toward that very future. The International Security Conference on Africa, or ISCA, wasn't just a conference, it was a declaration. A shot across the bow of the old world order. No more outsourcing peace, no more subcontracting sovereignty, no more waiting for development partners to solve problems they helped create. President Paul Kagame didn't just open a summit, he opened a new era, an era where security is not a Western export, but an African product. So, what is this new alliance? In this video, let's find out. What if Africa had stood its ground in 1963? What if, instead of allowing foreign militaries to train their armies and advise their governments, Africa had created its own continental security structure, run by Africans, funded by Africans, for Africans? That what if is no longer hypothetical. It is now ISCA, the International Security Conference on Africa, hosted in Kigali, Rwanda, in 2025. And it should have happened 50 years ago. But perhaps the delay makes the message even louder. When President Paul Kagame opened the summit with the words, "Africa's future, particularly in matters of peace and security, cannot be outsourced," he wasn't issuing a policy line. He was throwing dirt on the grave of an old world order, one in which African lives were policed by foreign hands. He didn't name NATO, AFRICOM, or the French military by name. He didn't have to. The message was clear. From Libya to Mali to Somalia, foreign intervention has left nothing but fractured states and forgotten promises. Every foreign-led security mission in Africa came dressed in the robes of humanitarianism, but exited under clouds of chaos. But now, Kigali wasn't just a host city, it was a declaration. This was Africa's statement to the world. We don't need external peacekeepers. We need internal power holders, and ISCA is the blueprint for building them. But where did this boldness come from? Kagame, after all, was once seen as a darling of the West, clean, efficient, cooperative. So why is he suddenly talking like a revolutionary? Because someone lit the fire first, and his name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Kagame didn't say it outright. He didn't have to. When he said, "We cannot complain about interference while creating the conditions that invite it," it echoed something Traoré has said over and over, that Africa's weakness is not just exploited, it is volunteered. Traoré was the first to rip the bandage off. He kicked out French troops from Burkina Faso. He rejected USAID and refused Western aid laced with conditions. He banned the export of raw resources to force value creation at home. And he did it all not with permission, but with conviction. Now Kagame, dressed in a suit instead of fatigues, is validating the same ideology from within the halls of state diplomacy. This is not a contradiction. It is convergence. The AES, Alliance of Sahel States, showed what defiance looks like under pressure. ISCA now shows what that same defiance looks like under planning. What was once a rogue path is now becoming a continental consensus. Traoré kicked the door open. Kagame is furnishing the room. But no paradigm shift is complete without institutional backing. That's where Musa Faki Mahamat, the former African Union Commission chair, enters the scene. His tone? Less diplomatic, more defiant. Historically, the African Union has been timid when it comes to security autonomy, always deferring to donor funds, UN frameworks, and foreign troops. But this time, Faki dropped the pretense. He said, Africa must be able to rely on a platform rooted in its own realities. That wasn't just commentary. It was a call to abandon the addiction to foreign crutches. What Kagame started with political will, Faki backed with structural ambition. He proposed a permanent African security framework, housed and led by Africans, built not as a reaction to Western withdrawal, but as an act of continental maturity. He didn't call it a firewall, but that's what he described. a defense system that shields Africa from cyber sabotage, insurgent infiltration, climate-driven displacement, and yes, Western exploitation dressed as aid. The West, once considered a safety net, is now the very source of the flames. So Africa must build its own firewall, not against external enemies alone, but against internal dependency. This was no longer a panel discussion. This was a strategic doctrine. And ISCA is the headquarters. With Kagame setting the fire and Faki building the firewall, the next question becomes clear. Can African nations truly form an integrated, coordinated security bloc, one that not only responds to crises, but prevents them? The answer may already be emerging in the shadows of the AES, where military cooperation, joint intelligence, and sovereign decision-making are showing results. But now, the momentum isn't isolated, it's continental. Because if Kigali was the spark, then the rest of Africa is the dry grass, and the fire is catching. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. What unfolded in Kigali was not a ceremonial gathering. It was the declaration of a new battlefield, one that would not be fought with borrowed tanks or foreign advisors, but with African-made doctrine and African-forged belief. Kagame's words signaled this shift, but it was the exhibition halls and breakout strategy sessions that confirmed it. Africa is no longer waiting to be taught how to defend itself. It is now building the hardware, the software, and the political consensus to do it alone. The presence of locally engineered drones, developed not in foreign labs but by Rwandan military technicians, was not simply a matter of national pride. It was a statement of intent. These weren't prototypes designed for show. These were operational technologies, built, tested, and refined for deployment in Africa's unique terrains and conflict zones. Alongside these unmanned systems were biometric surveillance tools designed by African cybersecurity firms, offering real-time intelligence capabilities that until now were the exclusive domain of NATO contractors. This was no longer an exercise in aspiration. It was a blueprint for immediate implementation, and it did something foreign advisors never thought possible. It aligned technical capacity with political will. Kagame's declaration that, where we lack capacity, this is the time and place to build it, was not a hopeful wish. It was a command to fellow leaders to stop waiting for European training programs and begin building indigenous power. And while the gear and graphs were impressive, what they really symbolized was a more dangerous force than firepower: belief. The belief that security no longer has to be negotiated in Geneva or financed in Washington. The belief that the AES model, once dismissed as rogue militancy, has matured into a replicable, institutional structure. Kigali didn't reject what Traoré was doing in the Sahel. It endorsed it. But it did so in the language of institutions, not insurgency. The AES spirit had arrived in a suit, not in fatigues, and now it had a headquarters. And this is creating shockwaves in the West. Inside Western intelligence circles, the panic didn't begin with the conference. It began the moment they realized that ISCA might become permanent. For decades, the strategy had been to manage Africa's instability, not solve it. Instability, after all, justified intervention. But ISCA throws that logic into the fire. If Africans start believing they can build their own solutions technologically, militarily, diplomatically, then the very foundation of Western influence begins to erode. And it isn't just about troops. What's truly at stake is psychological real estate. For too long, Africans were taught that security must be imported, that threats must be assessed from abroad, and that legitimacy only came with a handshake from Paris or Washington. ISCA shattered that illusion. It offered a different image, one where sovereignty isn't performative but operational, one where generals report to the people, not to foreign donors. The West now fears a domino effect. If Kigali joins Ouagadougou, if Nairobi quietly supports the framework, if Addis Ababa begins restructuring its military doctrine to reflect continental priorities, rather than UN blue helmets, then Africa's center of gravity shifts entirely. And when that happens, aid contracts become irrelevant. Military assistance loses its grip. AFRICOM loses its relevance. Even the carefully cultivated narrative that military coups are universally illegitimate starts to fracture. The more African security is defined on African terms, the more the old system begins to collapse, not from external assault, but from internal refusal. And it is that refusal, that simple rejection of dependency, that has become the West's greatest threat. They know that when Africans start building their own defense architecture, they are no longer clients. They are no longer recipients. They are competitors in a global game of influence. And worse, they have the moral high ground. Therefore, what happened in Kigali cannot be categorized as a conference. It was a continental declaration of war, not against any external nation, but against the belief that Africa must always be defended by others. It was not loud, but it was irreversible. Kagame, once considered the West's most reliable ally in the Great Lakes region, had crossed a line, not with aggression, but with structure. He didn't protest the system. He offered an alternative. Traoré began the movement. Moussa Faki gave it diplomatic legitimacy. Kagame gave it operational teeth. And now the question is no longer whether the movement will spread. It is whether Africa's other leaders have the courage to join it. Because what ISCA has done is remove the excuse. The tools are there. The ideas are mature. The partnerships are forming. There is no longer a justification to rely on foreign capacity-building programs when the capacity is already being built on the continent. This shift matters because it is more than political. It is generational. For the first time since decolonization, young Africans are witnessing a change that doesn't come from coups or foreign-imposed transitions, but from institutional evolution. And as ISCA gains credibility, it will do what no donor-funded workshop ever could. It will convince a generation that Africa can be its own shield. What do you think? What happens when African nations fund African security using African resources for African interests? How will France, the US, and other foreign military powers respond to African nations refusing external bases? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether ISCA could grow into something bigger than defense, maybe even an African superstructure of united sovereignty? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.